I found out my wife still wasn't over her ex, but I don't want to give up yet. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to post something like this. I've always been the private type, keeping our personal life between my wife and me. But lately, things have been eating away at me, and I feel like I need to get it off my chest. I'm writing this because I'm hoping that putting it into words will give me some clarity. Maybe, just maybe, someone out there has been through something similar. It all started a few months ago. My wife, let's call her Olivia, and I have been married for about 6 years. For the most part, our marriage has been solid. We've had our ups and downs like anyone else, but nothing ever felt fragile. Not until recently. Olivia had always been a bit of a nostalgic person, the type who would keep old letters, photos, and mementos from different stages of her life. I never really minded it until one day I noticed something odd. She had been spending a lot of time on her phone, more than usual. At first, I chalked it up to work or catching up with friends. But then I started noticing a pattern. Whenever she was on her phone, she seemed distant, almost lost in thought. It wasn't just her zoning out. It was like she wasn't fully present with me anymore. I tried to ignore it for a while. Everyone gets caught up in their own world from time to time, right? But it kept happening. She'd be scrolling through her phone with this faraway look in her eyes, and then she'd quickly lock the screen when I walked into the room. I wouldn't call it suspicious, but it did make me curious. One night, after she'd gone to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was gnawing at me, so I did something I'm not proud of. I picked up her phone. I wish I could say I found nothing, that I was overthinking it, and everything was fine, but that's not what happened. I saw she had been looking at someone's social media, her ex's, the guy she had dated in high school. Let's call him Alex. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. His profile was just there. She hadn't been talking to him or anything like that, but the fact that she was regularly checking his page felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just one time either. There was a clear history of her looking him up, scrolling through his pictures, reading his posts. I didn't confront her right away. I'm not the confrontational type. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or accuse her of something without understanding it first. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. A few days later, I asked her. I didn't accuse her or raise my voice. I just asked, "Hey, can we talk about something? I've noticed you've been looking at Alex's profile lately. Is there a reason?" She looked surprised, but she didn't deny it. After a moment, she sighed, and I could see the weight of whatever she was carrying settle over her shoulders. She told me it wasn't Alex himself she missed. It wasn't that she wanted him back or anything like that. What she missed, she said, was the memory. I wasn't entirely sure what she meant by that, so I asked her to explain. She told me Alex was her first love. They dated in high school, and he had been everything she thought she wanted at the time. He was sweet, gentle, and kind. But she was young, immature, and didn't know how to handle her emotions. She admitted that she had been difficult to be with back then. Silent treatment, picking fights, pushing him away even when she didn't want to. Eventually, it got to him, and he left. When they broke up, it devastated her. She said she hadn't realized how much he meant to her until he was gone. She told me she had moved on, but there were times when she'd think back to that relationship and wonder what could have been if she hadn't messed it up. And now, all these years later, those feelings would bubble up from time to time. "It's not him," she said, her voice trembling a bit. "It's just a memory, that time in my life. It's like this idealized version of something I can't go back to." I sat there for a minute, letting her words sink in. I didn't know how to feel. On the one hand, I was relieved that she wasn't pining after him, that she didn't want to leave me for her ex. But on the other hand, it hurt. It hurt to know that there was this piece of her heart that still belonged to him, or rather, the version of him that lived in her memory. I didn't push it further that night. I told her I understood, and we left it at that. But deep down, something shifted in me. I tried to move on from it, to accept that this was just a part of her past, and it didn't have to affect our future. But it wasn't that simple. Over the next few weeks, I found myself feeling more and more distant from her. It was subtle at first. Maybe I didn't kiss her goodnight with as much enthusiasm, or maybe I stopped asking her how her day was. I didn't mean to pull away, but it felt like something inside me was shutting down. Every time I looked at her, all I could think about was Alex. I kept imagining her replaying those memories in her head, comparing me to him. Was I enough for her? Was our life together enough? I know I shouldn't have, but I started checking her phone more often, just to see if she was still looking at his profile, and she was. Not every day, but enough that it became a pattern. She wasn't interacting with him, but she was still watching. I didn't confront her again. I didn't want to push her away, but the more I ignored it, the more it got to me. It wasn't just about Alex anymore. It was about us. I started to feel like our marriage was falling apart, like we were slowly drifting away from each other, and I didn't know how to stop it. Olivia noticed, of course. She asked me if I was okay, and I told her I was fine. But I wasn't. I didn't know how to explain to her that even though she said it was just a memory, it still hurt. It still made me feel like I was competing with a ghost. I started thinking about our life together, how we'd met, fallen in love, gotten married. I thought about all the good times we'd had, and how none of that seemed to matter anymore, because all I could focus on was this one thing. This one person from her past who seemed to have this hold on her. I tried to remind myself that we had a good marriage, that we loved each other, but it didn't feel like enough. Not anymore. At one point, I considered suggesting we go to couples therapy, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up without sounding accusatory. I didn't want her to think I was blaming her, but I didn't know how to fix this on my own. Then one night, she came to me. She said she could tell something was wrong, that she could feel the distance between us growing. She asked me if we were okay, and for the first time in weeks, I told her the truth. I told her I didn't know if we were okay. I told her how much it hurt to know that she still thought about Alex, even if it was just a memory of him. I told her I felt like I was losing her, and I didn't know how to stop it. She didn't get defensive. She didn't try to brush it off. Instead, she started crying. She told me that she was ashamed of herself for not being able to let go of the past, that she didn't know how to face me because she felt guilty. She said she loved me and she didn't want to lose me, but she didn't know how to fix things either. That's when we decided to go to couples therapy. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. We needed help, and we couldn't do this on our own. Therapy was tough at first. We had to talk about things we had both been avoiding for a long time, but slowly we started to make progress. We started to communicate better, to understand where the other was coming from. I learned that Olivia's attachment to her past wasn't about Alex himself. It was about a version of herself that she hadn't fully let go of. She had been holding on to guilt and regret for years, and it had started to affect our relationship in ways she hadn't even realized. As for me, I had to learn how to let go of my insecurities. I had to trust that what we had was enough, that I didn't need to compete with her past. It wasn't easy, but over time, we started to heal. Our relationship isn't perfect, and I don't think it ever will be, but we're trying. We're working on it. And that's more than I could have asked for a few months ago. So here I am, sharing my story with strangers on the internet, hoping that maybe someone out there has been through something similar and can offer some advice. Or maybe just knowing that I'm not alone in this will help. Marriage is hard. Loving someone is hard. But I don't want to give up. Not yet. Update. Hey everyone. I didn't expect to come back and update, but since my first post got a lot of support and advice, I figured it's only right to let you all know how things are going now. It's been about 6 months since we started couples therapy, and I'll be honest, things have been tough, but we're getting better. The therapy sessions were a real eye-opener for both of us. We had to talk about some difficult truths, especially Olivia's lingering feelings about her past and my growing resentment because of it. But those conversations, as uncomfortable as they were, forced us to face our issues head-on instead of tiptoeing around them. One of the biggest takeaways for me was realizing that Olivia's nostalgia wasn't about her wanting to be with Alex. It was more about her feeling stuck in a version of herself that she regretted. She was carrying around guilt and shame for the way she handled that relationship, and in some ways, she felt like she didn't deserve to be happy in our marriage until she dealt with that part of her past. I guess that's what made her check up on him online. She was measuring her growth against a time she didn't want to go back to, but also hadn't fully let go of. In therapy, we worked through a lot of those feelings. Olivia admitted how ashamed she felt about not letting go of the past, and that was one of the reasons she started to drift away from me. She didn't know how to confront her own emotions and was scared of how I'd react if I knew the full extent of it. We've come a long way in talking openly without judgment, and I've been trying to be more understanding instead of jumping to conclusions. On my end, I had to learn to let go of my insecurities. I'd be lying if I said it was easy. There were times when I wanted to give up and let my fears take over. But the more I focused on what we have now, the more I realized that I don't need to compete with her past. She chose to be with me, and that means something. The past is just that, the past. And I'm learning to accept that. We still have our moments. Sometimes old wounds resurface, and we have to remind ourselves of the progress we've made. But things are good. We laugh more, we spend more time together, and most importantly, we feel like we're in this together again. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful. And that's a start, right? Thanks again for all the support, and for those of you who are struggling in your relationships, hang in there. It's worth fighting for, as long as you both want to make it work. Update. I can't believe it's been 2 years since my last update. I wanted to come back and share where we're at now because a lot has changed, mostly for the better. After we stuck with therapy for a year, we eventually stopped going regularly because we felt like we had built up the tools to handle things on our own. Olivia and I communicate better than we ever have. We don't just brush issues under the rug anymore. When something feels off, we talk about it, even if it's uncomfortable. I'd say that therapy not only helped us mend our relationship, but also made us stronger as a couple. It sounds cliché, but it's true. We've been through some pretty tough stuff, and we're still here, still choosing each other every day. There's something really powerful in that. A big change that's happened recently is that we've been talking about trying for a baby. 2 years ago, the idea of starting a family seemed impossible when we were barely holding ourselves together. But now, we're in such a different place. We're ready, or at least as ready as you can ever be for something like this. The idea of becoming parents is both exciting and terrifying. I think the process of working through our issues has made us realize how much we want to build something together, not just for us, but for the future. We've had a lot of conversations about what kind of parents we want to be, how we'll handle things like conflict and communication, and making sure we stay connected as a couple once there's a little one in the mix. I'm not going to lie, it's still scary to think about. I mean, after everything we went through, there's always that fear in the back of my mind. Will we be strong enough to handle the stress of parenthood? But I'm trying to trust that we've done the work. We've rebuilt our foundation, and I think we're in a solid place to take this next step. Olivia's nervous too, but in a good way. We've talked a lot about her past, the stuff that used to come between us, and I'm proud of her for how much she's let go of. She's forgiven herself, and I think that's allowed her to fully embrace the idea of building a future with me. We're not perfect, and we still have moments where we slip up. But now, we know how to handle those moments without letting them tear us apart. We're planning to start trying for a baby in the next few months. It feels surreal to even type that out. I'm sure there will be new challenges ahead, but I'm feeling more confident in our ability to face them together. Anyway, I just wanted to check in and say thanks again to everyone who offered support and advice along the way. If anyone out there is reading this and going through something similar, whether it's dealing with the past or figuring out how to move forward, just know that it is possible to come out the other side stronger. It takes work, patience, and a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but it's worth it. Here's to the future. Wish us luck.